Stephen, good to see you. And
Good to see you too.
thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. Always appreciate that because I know you're busy. Let me kick off by playing back to you something that you said to me last time we spoke, which really kind of struck a chord with me. You said to me, and I'm just checking here, you said recruitment is just a numbers game.
hmm
Now, a lot of people will be shocked by that. I mean, tell people what you mean. Why do you say that? What do you mean by that? And why does that matter?
Yeah, I think number one, it's great to see you again. Thanks for having me on. When I say recruitment is a numbers game, there's two different ways to think about it. The first way is that everybody who's applying for a job has gone through this process of submitting dozens, if not hundreds, of applications and hearing nothing back from a lot of these companies. And what we've really done when we've digitized the hiring process is we've removed all the friction around hitting the apply button.
Yeah.
And because we've made it so easy for people to apply for jobs, they're applying to hundreds, if not thousands of jobs over the course of a career. And if you flip that and you think about it from the hiring side, so the employer side, they're receiving thousands of resumes for every single job application. And one piece of data I got was a very large tech company. They are getting somewhere to the tune of 8,000 applications per job posting.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, like, how do you even approach that problem, right? So how are you going through and reading those resumes? And there's a number of ways that they've done it in the past, but I think when I say it's a numbers game, we've taken an old antiquated process, which was to print out, your job history onto a piece of paper and walk it into somebody's office. And we've just duct taped that around a digital format.
Yeah.
And you've seen that with LinkedIn, you've seen it with all of the different job sites. And it's just created this noise. And you have employers who are drowning in
Yeah.
applications.
Yeah.
And then you have applicants who are just completely slamming their heads against the wall, saying, like, what's the point of even doing this? I'm never hearing back. There's massive inconsistencies with applications. And so it just creates a big mess. And I think everybody's really frustrated with it. And then you have people reverting to this old line, which I sort of agree with. But then I have to ask the more provocative question, right? Which is, well, you don't really get jobs from applying online. You get them from going to your network.
Yeah.
And the provocative question is, then why are we posting them online?
Yeah. Let
Why
me
are we
let
still
me
accepting applications?
let me just ask you about that because one of the other interesting things you said to me was, wouldn't it be better instead of a one-page CV? You said, why don't we have a five-page CV?
Yeah.
And my immediate reaction was, well, because I couldn't read 8,000 5-page CVs. But what you're saying is that technology can help solve that problem. I mean, just talk us through
Mhm.
that idea because I think that's a really interesting take on how you
Yeah.
solve the current problem.
Yeah. So this is actually, and I'll hopefully weave this in well. You can tell me if I go on too far of a tangent. But this is what sparked the idea for my company Uncover. So I had actually, we won't talk about Uncover 1.0 because it was in a very different world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was winding that down and I found a job that somebody had sent to me for a senior sales role at a very well-known tech company. If it's okay, I won't out them right now. And the first line was, we don't have time to read all your resumes, so we don't want your resume. We want you to answer these five questions very
Yeah,
thoroughly.
yeah,
They just said the quiet part out loud, which is exactly what you said. They said, we're drowning in this. And so their solution was to put more work on the applicant.
yeah,
Now, I said to myself, I just spent, I don't know, I'll be really candid, maybe about an hour, hour and a half revamping my resume. And I said, well, I put all of this in my resume. So what am I like? Why am I copy and pasting it? And then the thing that hit me, like a brick to the face was this was in 2024, December 2024. So I think we are 2 years into ChatGPT.
yeah,
We were a couple years into transcriptive AI. And so we have the ability to read these things at scale. And I just said, you're joking. Like, what do you mean? You're still reading resumes? You're still reading responses? You're not using AI to read through these? And it sent me down this crazy rabbit hole to learn about this industry that I have not been involved in uh, really at all in my career. And so we have this concept of we're going to put all of our experiences onto a piece of paper. And what we were all taught, just like you said, was, we got to keep it to one page.
yeah,
And the reason we have to keep it to one page is because people can't read it. Well, now we have this amazing tool and this concept of large language models that can read massive amounts of data.
Yeah.
Let's call it 1,000 times longer than a one-page resume in seconds
Yeah.
and analyze. And we just weren't using it. And it kind of got me down this crazy rabbit hole of the whole system is just, like I said, we're taking antiquated processes and we're duct taping them into technology,
Yeah.
right? Why are we even using resumes? Why is it still in a Word doc format? I had that thought this morning. We open up a Word document and there's still pages, right? Why? Why are there pages? Nobody prints these things out. Why isn't it just one long format, like an infinite scroll? And so we're kind of at this impasse. And yeah, I think we're doing a pretty good
And
job of
just
solving the problem.
explain to people how this idea of, let's say, a 5-page CV,
Yeah.
how would that make the recruitment process better for both the employer and the
Yes.
person that's trying to get the job? I mean, just explain
Mhm.
why that would work better. I mean, because
Yeah.
we talked that through. I mean, just explain that for people because it's a
Sure. Can you mind if I ask you a question using an analogy that might explain it? Right.
yeah, sure.
So if you and I are about to have a 1 hour conversation, right? And hopefully by the end of that hour, you'll have a pretty good understanding of who I am, how I communicate, whether or not I'm a culture fit for whatever your organization might be, right? But I'd ask you the same question. If you walked up to, let's call it a barista at a coffee shop, and you had a quick 2-minute interaction with them, do you know anything about them?
Nope.
No. And you can take that and you can apply that to a one-page resume versus a 5-page resume. If I'm going to condense 15 years of my career into a single page, it's not going to include everything that I've done
Yeah.
in that 15 years. And the saddest part about all this for me, and this is what's really sad, is in order to condense it down to a point where it's a singular page, we have to strip out all the
All the interesting
humanity.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And not even well, the interesting stuff, yes, but even the way that I speak, right? We spend time going through and removing every single filler word. We remove every little bit of detail that's not 100% necessary. And the devil's in those details. It's how do they communicate? Do they say we? Do they say I? Do they talk about working with a team? Did they, what were the lengths with, like, what were some of the processes that they built to get to that level of success, right? But instead, we all just use these same buzzwords, built, created, defined. Like, it's just robotic. And so the reason it becomes so hard for employers, this is tough for me, employers to find good candidates in a stack of resumes is because they don't, even a good resume, you know nothing about that person.
Yeah.
And so instead of fixing that process, what everyone has done is they've just added more processes to the back end or the middle of the interview process. Questions on applications, phone screens, all of these different things. And so really it's just a simple concept of you can't condense somebody's long career into a singular page and expect to learn anything about them. The same way you wouldn't expect to learn anything about someone for talking to them for 60 seconds. You might
Yeah.
learn a little bit, but you're not going to have like a deep understanding of what that person's done. Um, and I did this exercise a couple times throughout the past year. Like I've gone and I've written a 1-page resume, and then I've taken my career and I've written a 4-page resume. And the 4-page resume is, man, it makes me look like I've really accomplished a lot of cool shit.
Okay.
And the 1-page resume is like, man, I suck.
Yeah.
I've done nothing. And it's like it's just wild, that we do this. Sorry, I get really worked up, but probably
The
more
other the
emotional
other
about
thing that
this.
I thought
Yeah.
was very important about what you said is that one of the problems is that people that are applying for jobs never get any feedback. So
Yeah.
they can't improve because people get the 1-page resume, it kind of goes
Mhm.
into the system. If they're not picked out of the crowd of 8,000, they
Right.
don't progress, but they never get any feedback. And what your point was that if we used AI both
Mhm.
to analyze much larger curriculum CV
Sure. Yeah,
information,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
you could then give people feedback about whether their CV actually matched the
Right.
job effectively, and you could tell people why they didn't get it. So your point was, wouldn't it be better if AI read every application rather than at the
Mhm.
moment humans reading almost none of them?
Almost none. And yes. And so that is, I think it would benefit humanity. I don't know about humanity is maybe a little bit grandiose, right? Let's call it the working, population of people who are building resumes, right? Let's keep some perspective on, like, the world. the idea that you would submit a resume to this, I call it the abyss, right? It just goes into some black hole and then it comes back out and it says a very fluffy answer that is generic every time. Hey, Steve, we really appreciate blah, blah, blah. We've decided to move forward with another candidate who, blah, 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 blah. But there's nothing specific about why your specific application wasn't a fit. They don't go, you had these three experiences. We're actually looking somebody for who indexed a little bit more with, selling to healthcare providers or selling to highly regulated industries, right? And so we've just created this kind of I'm going to throw spaghetti at the wall tactic for applicants. And then we're just going to respond with a very generic one-page response. The irony of all this, right? And maybe it's not as ironic as I think, is when I teach and used to train salespeople how to do outreach, the number one rule is don't send generic emails,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I often think a lot of times I used to have another, I've run customer service, I'm calling customer service, account management, customer success organizations, and they're not often treated as like an extension of the business and the brand and the revenue leg of the business. I truly believe that companies are doing a massive disservice to their brands by not allowing applicants to have a good experience through the application process. They focus a little bit on the hiring process, right? Once they get somebody into their funnel, it's we're going to hold your hand. We're going to do all of this. We're going to, do the interview process. We're going to communicate the best we can. And even that falls short a lot of the time. But through the application process, we just swat people away like flies. And it leaves a mark. You apply for a job somewhere and they just come back with, they either come back with a very generic response with no feedback, or they just don't reply at all, which is the
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
of 90% of these. And that hurts. And it leaves it, you're like, okay, I had an opinion about this organization, and maybe that opinion's changed.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it's a fair point actually, because I mean, essentially, it's the person applying for the job is making lots of effort, and it appears that
mhm,
the employer is not making any effort. I mean,
no,
and it's very disrespectful, isn't it? Which is never going to go down well with people. And
right.
let me ask you about your business and the technology you're developing. I mean, that's a sort of we've had a bit of a debate about the big issues around recruitment. I mean,
Mhm.
what specifically are you guys going to try and do about it? I mean, what impact do you want to have?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think from an impact perspective, I would just love if we could get to a point where everybody had longer resumes, right? And I think that would just be a massive win. If we get to a point where we all just say, okay, my resume doesn't need to be one page because AI is reading it. And I think that in and of itself, if this company goes to bust or goes to zero, but at the very least, figure out a way to say, hey, let's use AI to read every single resume and let's actually give you the top 50, 100 candidates. I think that would be a huge win. That'd be a great impact. The challenge then becomes, well, what do you do at scale? So we have this problem that I talked about, which is scale, where it's way too easy to apply and you have thousands and thousands of applicants, right? And so I say it's relatively easy because it was relatively easy to build this tool that read thousands of resumes and then ranked them based on a job description, right? Everybody can do this in ChatGPT manually. And maybe I shouldn't have said that. That's not really the secret sauce of how it works, but that's the core crux of what
Yeah.
we're doing. We're
Yeah.
basically taking a job description and we're cross-referencing again everybody's resume, and we're saying which one of these resumes matches up best. And the cool thing about job descriptions is a lot of them will have a big about section for the company, what they stand for. A lot of companies will include their cultural values, all of these different things. So with AI, you can actually read and say, okay, this company values these things. Let's see if any of that stands out in these resumes instead of just, the hard skills, right? So what we call the soft skills. But then to get it at scale becomes a real problem. So now you have this issue of, okay, you've got let's call it 1,000 resumes. We've now narrowed it down to 50 people, right? So we have 50 people. Let's say they're all ranked. Like our ranking is 1 out of 100. They're all ranked 80 or above. Well, now what? We still have a problem of interviewing and hiring these people at scale. The idea that you're going to ask a hiring manager, right, to do 50
Yeah,
interviews
it's not going to
initial,
happen, is it?
not going to happen. They
Yeah.
don't have time. And so we got to that point and we said, okay, well, there's another problem. And what's a good way to solve that? And this is where we're kind of dancing in the world of AI of, is this going to work or is this, sci-fi movie stuff? And my idea was to go back contradicting myself a little bit to what I call old school hiring, which was this concept of a phone screen. So you used to submit an application or apply for a job, and if you got a call back, you would do a phone screen. And it was 15 minutes, right? They say, we just want to hear that you're a person, you can communicate. You're basically
Yeah.
checking for culture fit, right? And I thought of a way to do that at scale, which is to basically take, again, using large language models. If I have my top 50 candidates, why don't I read each of those resumes individually and then send resume specific questions to all 50 candidates and
Okay, I
let them
get it.
reply that
I
way?
get it.
So I call it a phone screen, but it's probably not going to be a phone screen. Technically, everybody could do it via phone if they wanted to. I think it would annoy a lot of people. So we would do it digitally.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you can get to that point where you're then allowing people to reply to the questions that you're asking on the front end now of the application, but you're telling them they have a chance. And this is another thing that I think, I don't know if we're going to get to this or not, but I'll just interject it. When I was going through my research initially, I found these two significant problems in the application process. And I think I talked to you about this. I called them pre-application bounce and mid-application bounce,
Yeah.
right? So pre-application bounce is when you go on LinkedIn and you see that there's 100 people who have already applied. Throw my hands up. I don't have a shot. I don't have a snowball's chance in hell of getting reviewed, so I'm just going to go on to the next one. That's a huge problem. I think we could solve that if I said it underneath every single job, hey, your resume will get reviewed. It's being reviewed by AI. It's not being reviewed by a human because we're humans, and that's impossible. But something is going to read what you
Yeah.
wrote and spent time on, and we are going to analyze it and see if it's a good fit. I would say, great, here you go. The second problem is mid-application bounce. So I can't rattle off the number on the top of my head, but the amount of people who go through and click apply, like say on LinkedIn, and then get to the phase where it goes to the company's ATS system, which is still so antiquated that most of the time
Yeah.
it won't import your resume. It would like you to manually add all of your stuff, and then it'll ask a bunch of questions and kind of almost doing the phone screen up front.
Yeah.
And what I heard from everybody was, whoa, we don't want lazy people. We don't want lazy people who aren't willing to do that. And I'm gonna call bullshit on that. They're not lazy. Maybe some of them are. I won't generalize, but they're doing calculus. They're saying, should I spend 15 minutes on this application where I don't know if I have a chance of it getting reviewed at
Right.
all,
Yeah.
or should I go apply to 20 more?
Yeah. So it's a
And
totally
so,
rational decision, isn't it, from their perspective?
right.
Yeah.
And they put it under the guise of, oh, we don't want, lazy people. And I'm just like, you're lazy.
Yeah.
Look how lazy that is. You're not going to so you don't want to read 250 resumes. So you're going to ask people to do specific questions instead of you reading the resumes. So
Yeah.
you're lazy, but they can't be lazy. And
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
put a fire in me, Paul, that I couldn't just, yeah, last year at the end of the year, my wife was like, you got to calm down. It's like, that's, I was just like, this is ridiculous. They call us lazy, but they're not reading the
Yeah.
resumes. They're
Yeah.
lazy. So
It's just an illustration of how crazy the world is these days, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
I think what you're talking about makes an awful lot of sense, actually. I mean, I totally get the logic of your
yeah.
argument. Let me just talk about you and business building. So, I mean,
Mm.
why did you? I mean, what is it about this that has kind of got you so excited that you're prepared to invest all the time and energy in building a business around this? I mean,
Yeah.
you came in from a
Yeah.
different sector, didn't you? I mean, what is it about this that is so enthralling to you?
The truth and really candid answer is frustration. I got angry and
Okay.
I got frustrated. And I knew this might be the last thing I ever found. It might be the fifth to last thing I ever found. I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, but the way I went about my career was I would like to get a lot of experience, some very good hard skills, and kind of see how the world works before I take this plunge into founder. And I have some, let's call it baggage, to back that up, right? I had worked early in my career with some people who had founded companies, and it's all they'd ever done. So they
Right.
had never worked across all legs of the organization.
Yeah.
And I just found it a little bit, there's always going to be those people who can do that and just nail it. But a lot of times you have, especially in today's, if being a founder sounds really cool. And so everybody wants to be a founder. And they don't really go through and understand, what it's like to work in an organization. So I always knew that I wanted to do it and that I would do it. but it was just a matter of when. And I definitely thought it would be something in sales, martech, maybe even fintech, you know. I love finance. I'm a finance nerd in many ways. Um, and I thought it would be something in there. And then, yeah, at the end of last year, I was just really frustrated that this
What?
was the process.
Why was it that I mean, what is it about the frustration that triggered you? I mean, I get frustrated about stuff. I don't
Yeah,
think I'm going to go and start a
sure.
business there. I mean, what was the
Yeah.
trigger? Was it that I'm frustrated and I think I can fix the problem, or was it just this is doing my head in? I mean, what was actually the trigger?
I didn't know if I could fix the problem. I really didn't. Because I think we talked about this before. I can't code. I had some success building the initial part of the product in these new AI tools, Cursor and Lovable and things like that. But it's like, I don't know if I can do this. Um, I think it was just, I'd been on both ends of this coin, both sides of this coin. At some point in the past 15 years, I had been uh, full transparency, I laid off from one of my jobs when they got rid of our department. And then you're scrambling as a young 23-year-old living in the city trying to find a job that's going to, pay your next month's rent. And then I'd also been on the receiving end. Once I got some experience and I got some really incredible opportunities, leadership opportunities to run teams, scale teams, build teams, and I'm experiencing how hard it is to hire, right? I had this just massive confliction where I was like so angry as a younger person. I was like, how is it so hard to hire people? Why is it so hard to do interviews? Then I have that anger and frustration on the top end. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do my job because all I do is
Yeah.
do interviews and hire people. And I think it was just like a prolonged kind of period of just this has always frustrated me at some point in my career, whether I'm the applicant or whether I'm the hiring manager. And you can ask anybody in this industry. And I think the reason I thought I had to do it was as I started to have initial conversations and just kind of scratch the surface, the visceral reaction from people when you talk to them about hiring, HR, or recruitment is just disdain,
Yeah.
disgust,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just frustration. And I just said to myself, I don't know, Steve. This is like the number one reason people, they told you in school to start a business is because something's broken. And if you have a 100% hit rate of people inside these organizations telling you it's broken, it's probably broken. And now we have this tool to fix it. And I think the AI thing was the other crux, right? So I say all that, that's me on a personal level. I don't think in the past 15, let's call it like 4 years ago, I think I knew this was a problem, but it like everybody, I was like, well, this is just the way it is. We don't have a tool to fix this, right? And now we can read data off PDFs,
Mm.
right? Which I don't think we could do 15, 20 years ago. Now we can take all that data, right, and read it with large language models. We can use the large language models who have experience across the vast swaths of data across the internet to make inferences. And that was it for me. It was the AI bit. It was how are we 2 years into AI and people are still reading resumes?
Yeah.
We have we have washed our hands of this idea that the AI is going to work slower than us. So we know it can work faster. So why are we not using it? And
Yeah.
that was the aha moment. I go,
Yeah. I get that.
they're not
I
doing
get
it.
that.
And then
And tell me
keyword
about being
matching.
I mean, a non-technical founder. I mean, my experience is that building a business is a tough gig, wherever you are. But you're trying
Yeah.
to build a business that is explicitly about tech. And
Uh-huh.
you're not a technical
Yeah.
founder. I mean, how does that feel? I mean, what's your experience of that been?
I'm not a technical. Someone said this to me at some point in the past year, so I'm stealing it. But they said I'm not hands-on keyboard technical, right? So I don't know how to code, right? But I do deeply understand. I'm a very technical person, right? I understand how all of this works. I understand why it all works. It's just actually connecting the dots using, I'll call it, um, old coding styles.
Right.
Um, I can't do that again, kind of leaning on AI, but the gift of AI was given to me, right? So now you have the ability to um, build prototypes of products by just talking to a GPT, and it will do all of the coding for you, right? So, in full transparency, I was able to get this product to, I call it a pseudo working function,
Right.
just by having like a 3-day conversation with the GPT on Cursor and Lovable, right? at the end of the day, it didn't all connect the way that I needed it to connect. And so I had to find a developer offshore who was fantastic. And that was also key, right? So when you say, there was these probably a 2 or 3 month period where I was just trying to brute force it myself. And then I went to my network throughout those 2 months and I said, I need help, I need help, I need help. I had worked with a development shop at my previous endeavor, and it cost me a small fortune.
Mm.
And so I went a different direction. I worked with like a single developer. So everything happened actually didn't happen slower. It happened a lot faster because there was a
Yeah.
single point of failure in communication. Um, and so I thought that was really helpful. But having an understanding of the technical capabilities is super key as a non-technical founder. And going back to what I talked about, getting experience, right? My early career, when I was just selling software, we had a solutions engineer at one of my companies, Salesforce. They had people that would basically do all the technical stuff, and I knew nothing. But then when you make the jump into working in an early stage tech company, a lot of times what I was selling, we didn't have. So I had to get up off my desk, walk over to product or eng and say, I need to build this. And I started to kind of understand
Okay.
what it is they were doing, how they were doing it. And so, as a non-technical founder, it's really helped me because I've worked in these early stage companies where that's it. You have to just go talk to them and have them build it. And I'm able to sit and watch and kind of understand their process. And, I remember the first time I saw like an Asana table, right? I was just like, whoa, what is this thing? Right. And it helps to kind of live in their world a little bit.
Yeah.
And so when I'm working with my technical people, while I can't do what they do, I deeply understand and empathize what
Yeah.
they're doing. Versus I
And
think a lot of non-technical founders will just say, oh, just build it. It's super easy, right? Just can you make the internet do the website internet thing? And they don't understand. They're like, well, what database do you want to use? They're like, what? But you need to kind of have at least an
yeah.
understanding of, the baseline layers of all that stuff. So,
And
yeah.
how do you think technical people feel about being led by a non-technical founder? I mean,
Oh,
have you got a
God.
sense of how the other side approach it?
Now we can get into the fun, gritty stuff here. So I think I think yeah, I don't really, I think it frustrates a lot of people. I think it
Mm.
frustrates a lot of people. I think a lot of people look at me, and maybe this is my own imposter syndrome talking here, right? They say, oh, well, like, that's not going to work. Non-technical founders, never really work out, right? Um, and I think there's like a weird stigma around it now if you're not a technical founder, because you see all of these technical founders who have had these huge, massive successes. What you don't see are all the technical founders who have failed miserably,
That's right.
right? And I think this is one of the biggest things. I'm so happy we're talking about this because they're not immune to the same things that every other business person is, right? You see the Zuckerbergs, the Sam Altmans, the Elons. I'll say Larry Ellison too. Even Benioff, I think, was a technical-ish person before
Bill
Salesforce,
Gates.
right? Bill Gates, right? And you see these people, right? But I've actually, because in my spare time, I'm just like, I'll go on ChatGPT and just be like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, what are my odds, right? And you realize that there are so many companies who have just completely failed. And the reason they failed is because they had technical leadership that didn't understand either people, macroeconomic trends, or understand how to communicate the problem they were solving effectively to the buyer. I cannot tell you, Paul, how many times I have been in meetings or rooms where I watch technical salespeople, founders just get frustrated. And when they're through the selling process and we get off the call and they're like, they just didn't understand it. And I go, you didn't do a good job explaining it to them. It's
Mm.
your fault they didn't understand it. And I get a little
I mean,
heated
it's
because there are
interesting you
different,
say that. I
yeah,
remember. I mean, I remember in my last business. I mean, the CTO there. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know whether he was just saying this to wind me up, but he certainly did. I mean, he said to me, "Look, I don't want the customers to understand how it works." And I remember thinking, "What kind of madness is this?"
yeah,
I mean, if you want people to use things, make it easy for them. Don't make it hard.
right,
I mean,
right,
it's a really interesting issue that because as you're absolutely right. We focus on the success stories, but the vast majority, 95% of businesses fail.
yeah,
And the reason they're successful is not, generally speaking, anything to do with whether their founder is technical or non-technical. It's about a whole raft of other issues, it seems to me.
It's it's whether they are able to talk to the prospective customers or customers
Yeah.
and make changes based on customer feedback. And what I've seen, and this is my own personal worldview, is you have a lot of time people who have come from these large product and engineering and technical organizations, they've never actually talked to a customer and end user. So when they get into that really key phase of the early stage startup, they're just building because they think it should be built, right? Instead of actually talking to the customer.
Mm.
One job that I had, this was one of the reasons I left. So I can't say where it was or what the title was because it'll give it away. But we were at this company and the tech team wanted to build a bunch of stuff that they thought was cool. And that's going to sound I'm not making it up. They wanted to build on a new platform and these features that they thought were cool and interesting. And then me and my revenue team are over here talking to prospective customers, and they're like, we don't care about that at all. We
Yeah.
want this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And that disconnect is everything. You can really kind of drill down every failure of business to say, you didn't talk to the customer initially, you built this thing and it failed, or you built it and you stopped talking to the customers and understanding what they were doing, what they wanted, and it failed. Or, there's a number of other reasons businesses fail.
Yeah.
Co-founder fights, lack of funding, just
That's
run out of
right.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig building a business. Let me ask you about, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting at the moment is the pace of change. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think business has evolved as fast as it's evolving now ever before. I mean, and I think
yeah,
AI, of course, is helping that
yeah.
acceleration. But I mean, as the CEO, how do you manage that kind of constant change? I
Mhm.
mean, customer expectations are changing because they've seen what somebody else's thing will do and they want the same thing. The pace of change is happening because people come out with new stuff. You know, um,
Mhm.
Technology evolves so you can do more things. I mean, it's just incredibly. I mean, how do you keep up with that? I mean, what's your sort of experience of trying to stay ahead of the curve in that environment?
Yeah. It's stressful. It's incredibly stressful. I feel like, yeah. I'm going to think for a minute about how to answer that because I will say this, what's different about this company particularly versus all the other endeavors I've had is it seems like every time I talk to somebody, they have another company that's somewhere in my lane. I mean, and it's different. Like there's no consistency. Like every conversation, they go, "Have you heard of X? Have you heard of Y?" They're kind of doing something similar. They're doing X, Y, Z, and it's incredibly stressful. And I think this is where like a lot of founders and just generally, I won't even say founders, people who work at companies can get really stressed out because they think, oh my God, somebody's already done it. Someone's done it better.
Yeah.
And I think I've just worked in enough places to know like that's great that they're trying to do the same thing, but execution is king.
Yeah.
Like they're not, they can keep running at it, they can keep doing what they're doing, but like either they're gonna win or I'm gonna win. And I have a weirdly binary approach to this, I think, and again, benefits of being later in my career, right? If this goes belly up, like I'm still gonna have a place to live and all that stuff. So there's some of the stress is kind of off there. Um, but it's just I kind of have to have that binary, like either I'm gonna win or they're gonna win.
Yeah.
And my old boss, my first boss in sales ever, I was super nervous to walk into a meeting. This one meeting we had. And he just looks at me, kind of to mess with me, and he goes, "Hey Steve, it's either gonna go really well or it's gonna go really bad." And he goes, if you just kind of live in those two extremes and you realize that either one of them is fine, then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, oh, okay. And just kind of keep it into perspective. The pace of change is intense. But what's weird about the industry that I'm in, and this is, again, maybe I'm being overly transparent about some of the risks associated with my business. I didn't think I would get to month 4 without somebody building this already.
Right.
I
Okay.
know that for a fact that the largest ATS systems in the world, the ease with which we were able to build this and the price, I go, oh, I'm just going to get, but I wanted to do it anyway. I was like, oh, I'll get beat out. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun story for 6 months. But nobody's done it. And everybody who has tried to do it has done it in a way that I think is very different. They
Mm.
are still just approaching the problem wrong. They're trying to take the humanity out of hiring. And I'm trying to put the humanity back into hiring. And the easiest example of that is everyone keeps talking about agentic recruiting. and agentic interviewing. Now, I mentioned we have this concept that we're trying to build, which is agentic phone screens, but I'm trying to get people in front of people faster. What everybody else is doing is they're trying to just remove people from the process. They're trying to use AI agents to scrape, find jobs, to do interviews, right? I can't imagine. And maybe I'm from that. I know I'm of the age or generation where I remember life before technology and I remember life without technology.
Mhm.
I just can't imagine getting onto a job interview like we're talking right now and it being an AI agent. I'm not going to work for the AI agent. That's not my, at least not yet, not in the next 20 years, hopefully, right? But the idea that we're going to start this process with some robotic human, it just, they're all approaching the problem. And it's the same thing with my old developer team. It's very cool what everybody else is doing. I don't think it's what everybody wants or needs. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing I just keep telling myself. Every time I see something cool, I'm just like, that's just overkill, right? That's just overkill.
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
seems
so
to
you can
me,
see it.
it
Yeah.
seems to me it's about having a particular point of view on the problem. I mean, your other
Yeah.
point actually about I've seen this a lot. I mean, I'm old. I've been around a long time. I've seen people, including myself, spend
Yeah.
time and energy trying to solve the wrong problem. And
Yeah.
that's never a winning strategy, if you ask
Right.
me. So
Right.
I totally get what
No.
you're saying. Well, let me ask you
Yeah.
about something else that's because you've got a particular point of view, because it's very different from other people,
Yeah.
inevitably that means you're going to sort of bang up against the status quo. I mean, how do
Oh,
you
yeah.
feel about challenging the status quo? Do you enjoy it? Does it make you feel good? Does it get you down? I mean, just tell us about your kind of experiences of that.
Uh, I have always been a contrarian of sorts.
Mm.
I think, if you look at some of my, I'll call them earlier career missteps, right? Either I left or they, right? It's
Yeah,
because that I butted heads with people internally who
yeah.
I disagreed with about, never on a personal level. It was never personal. It was always process related or something like that. Um, I just have an innate ability that, I don't like to talk really great about myself a lot, but I'm married to a wonderful woman who constantly tells me these things, right? I have an ability to kind of see things around corners, and I have a massive frustration around inefficiencies.
Mm,
And and it's like in every aspect of my life, I'm trying to figure out how to make things faster and easier. Easier being the key word. Faster is not always better. Um, and I think I've always kind of had that point. And so in starting this, I started posting on LinkedIn, right? And I was like, I started posting these posts on LinkedIn about what I wanted to build. And they wouldn't get any traction. They wouldn't get any traction. And then I started to post how I really felt, right? And one of the key tenets that I posted about was the idea of external recruiter fees, which you're probably very familiar with, and
mhm.
we can talk about this a little bit. But I posted that there's a massive the incentive structures around recruiter fees are very misaligned
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
from what
yeah.
the person is trying to do. And my post went, I mean, viral for me is pretty low. But I mean, over 100,000 impressions on LinkedIn in a couple
Wow.
of, days and weeks, and just angry. Everybody was angry. Everyone, the idea that AI was going to replace their job, um, really just angered a lot of people. And that affected me in a very weird way. At first, it was like exciting. I was like, oh, you know, I've done it. Like there's clearly a problem here. If I'm striking that big of a nerve, I'm doing something right. Then I posted a couple more times, similarly, kind of attacking this industry. And it really started to just dawn on me. I was like, there's a whole world of people who do this for a living, and their jobs are being threatened right now.
Mm.
Um, and so my mindset kind of changed and it kind of just reverted back into what the core tenets of the business is. It's like, okay, if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else. If it's not, AI taking your jobs, there's just going to be less jobs. And then you're going to have more people fighting for jobs. And so why don't we just all kind of do that? It goes back to that point of, right, if there's going to be less jobs and more people fighting for jobs, then we need to do this a little differently or a little bit more
Mm.
efficiently. And I tried to channel it into that. But as far as being a contrarian, I have kicked the hornet's nest many times in my career. Um, and I will be a little
Why,
cranky.
why,
I've been
why?
right.
I mean, why do you kick the hornet's nest? I mean, most people would say that's a daft thing to do. I mean, why?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is it about that? I mean, do you enjoy it?
a risk model, I think it's a risk model, right? I think I have an idea of, I think it's a risk reward, right? So when I say kick the hornet's nest, we could keep doing the same thing and kind of trickle along, right? Or we can make the harder decision and take a big swing, right? And it's a power law dynamic, right? I think, I told you I'm a finance nerd. I love investing. We've invested in a number of startups, and I just the concept that, you have to kind of take these big swings and take these big risks
Yeah.
if you're ever going to get the astronomical returns, right? And that maybe seeps into my career a little bit too much,
Yeah.
which is, we can do these different things, these little things that are going to kind of keep pushing us forward step by step by step. But at the end of the day, we're all going to end up in the exact same place, professionally, which is just kind of in these mediocre companies that aren't really
Yeah.
changing anything or breaking anything, right? Um, and I think that's if I'm no one's ever really asked me that question, so thank you. But I think that's what drives it is just I see this, we could do it this way, and then I just have I don't know, I just think I'm always I don't need the job. I think I'm always going to be okay. I'll be able to find something else. Maybe it's a little bit of arrogance.
Maybe it's a
Um,
mindset thing, isn't it?
yeah.
I think it's about a confidence in the ability to overcome problems, I think. I don't think it's
Yeah.
arrogance.
And you know what it might be too, Paul? I think I didn't do it early in my career. And I had ideas, I had thoughts,
Right.
and I had things. And in some instances, I can actually now specifically reference if I had spoken up, if I had said something,
Mm.
regardless of whether they took it or not, it would have resulted in a very different outcome for me, maybe, and then maybe even the business. And I think so, yeah, we'll call it little workplace trauma. It's like I didn't speak up a lot of the time and kind of watched it fade, and then or watched anything kind of just fizzle, whether it be my path, the company, the product, whatever it was. Um, and so yeah, that's just yeah, it is a mind. I guess it's a mindset. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, depends
Let,
on
uh,
who you ask.
I mean, let me just take you back to the beginning. I mean, when you think back on your career, I mean, you just sort of talked about this a little bit. I mean, if you were to go back right to the beginning, is there
Hmm.
any one thing you do differently, this knowing what you know now? I mean, other than perhaps speak up a bit more often?
Yeah. Um, what would I have done differently? Um, I think everybody has this a little bit, but I actually don't know. No, that's not a good answer because I don't know if I did that every time. What I was going to say is like chasing money. A lot of times people will chase money. And when
Yeah.
you're early in your career, someone gave me a very good piece of advice. They were like little increments. Again, my power law, right? They're like, someone gives you a 10K raise, it's not going to change your life, right? But if you learn from somebody for 5 years and they're exceptional at what they do, that will eventually, result in
Yeah.
kind of a change. Um, if it's something I would say, I think I probably would have I would have started working at early stage companies sooner. So
Yeah.
what I ended up doing out of my career was the quote unquote safe bet. So I would go to these established, they weren't major corporations, but they were very well established businesses. So one great example is this company called Ibis World, amazing company based out of Australia, been around for 50 years. They sell financial research. Um, they paid me a little bit more than a couple other startups that I was interviewing at, right? And it was great, but those other startups were more chaotic and they had that thing that I eventually got thrown into. I think if I had had a little bit of that early in my career, I think it would have been really helpful. I think I could have thrived really well in those environments, right? The older style structured organizations are some of the organizations where I was really frustrated and challenged by
Yeah. Yeah.
the rigidity of the
Yeah.
process. But my upbringing was go the stable path, right? It was, oh, there are more,
I
you don't
think
want
a
to work
lot
at a
of,
startup, they fail, and it's
I
like
mean,
everything fails.
I think a lot of
Um,
people would identify with that. I mean, and that's because most parents worry about their kids, so they,
yeah,
encourage them to do things that are sensible, stroke,
yeah,
low risk. And I totally get
yeah,
it. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I totally get why parents want that. But it's not
yeah,
necessarily the most exciting or interesting thing to do, is it? And you don't, I mean, I think jumping, the thing about focusing on chaos is inevitably you will learn more in,
yeah,
environments that are a bit more sensible, for a want of a better way of describing it. You don't learn as much because there's not as many things going wrong. And it's mainly things going wrong that enables you to learn
right.
about how to do things or not do things, I think.
And I think there's
And
a, go ahead. Yeah.
well,
I
let
was
me
just
ask
gonna,
you. I mean, you just what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've been given?
hmm, what's the best piece of advice that I've been given? Um, I would say it is that it's so cliche. It's so cliche, but it's early on in your career. Don't focus on money. Focus on
Yeah.
I don't know if it's experience, like is the right word to say it, but learning, right? It's like focus on learning. And people used to say that shit to me, and I would get so annoyed. And I was like, but I have to make money. Like I don't understand this. Why do you get to make so much money? Why do I not get to make so much money? And blah 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 blah. And I think take that mindset of, don't always focus on the money, right? Focus on the experience. And so, um, the best piece of advice, that it's kind of stuck with me is like who you work for, like the person you're learning from matters a lot more than what you're making, what your pay structure is, what the company's even selling, right? Finding somebody exceptional that you can learn from will pay dividends down the road. Um, that's number one. I'd like to throw on a second, which is probably a lesson that I maybe learned the hard way, which is always keep expanding that network, right?
Mm.
I think at some point in everybody's career, at least in mine, I thought I had a really good network. And I'm not knocking anybody that I used to work with, right? But eventually you kind of hit these walls, right? But you think you have this network of these amazing people. And it's like you always kind of need to have that open network of
Mm.
going to meet new people, going to, experience new things, new cultures. And that really got unlocked for me when I moved to the UK, right? I was just like, this is just a completely different world. Than what I was exposed to. And
Oh,
it's
and
enlightening.
in what
Yeah.
way was it different? I mean, I know Americans that come to the UK and they wouldn't say that about the UK. I mean, what was
Yeah.
it about coming to the UK that was so enlightening, if you like? I mean, that's perhaps not the right way to describe it, but what is it that inspired that?
No, it's going to make me sound very, I guess, like a small worldview. But when I told people we were moving to the UK, I think one of their, oh, they're like, oh, it's going to be really easy because it's like English speaking, right?
Mm.
And please take this with a massive grain of salt, right? But I eventually developed a joke. I was like, I think it would have been easier for us to move to Singapore, or than it was to move to the UK. I mean, everything just moves at a different pace, right?
Yeah.
There's a different lifestyle, and the weirdest part is, and this is, I won't say I was young, but I was definitely didn't understand, right? You think of English, right? Where we speak English in America and the way you speak English in the UK. I mean, I was like, you think you're insulting people when you're not insulting people. They say
Yeah.
things, they're a little bit more, they're less direct, right? And so you talked about a little bit of me like ruffling feathers, right? I learned from that. I was like, oh man, I just kind of need to approach this a little bit differently, right? The language is different, right? And that's like a very baseline. I'm trying not to go like too into the weeds of it all about how it's different, but I just had this like aha moment of in America we live in this big box and bubble, and we just think everything is like, kind of perfect and hunky dory. And in Europe, it's a much more diverse, you go to different countries very regularly. A lot of people in the United States never left the United States, right? Which I think is a little bit more uncommon. And you just experience different culture. And because I was so inquisitive about it, I was like accepted in with like open arms, right? I was just an American that was just trying to learn because, I didn't understand how the VC system in the UK was very different than
Yeah.
what it is in the United States,
Yeah.
right? There's something called a VCT fund, which we can talk about at nauseum, which is very different than what, VC funds are in the United States. And I was just like, it's just a different world. And through that, I developed these relationships and this network that has just arguably paid me more dividends than what I thought my like original core network was. And I had to leave, go to another country to do that. And I think a lot of times you can kind of stay in your bubble. I don't know if that's a really good answer. It was a long-winded answer,
No,
maybe,
I
but
think it's a very
yeah,
good point actually, because what you're saying is about getting out of the bubble and
yeah,
experiencing new things, and what that does is it shifts your perspective, doesn't it? I mean, I'm a great believer that wisdom, if you like, emerges from evaluating your experiences. You go do
yeah.
things, you learn from them. As a result of that, you think maybe I'll do it differently next time, or maybe I'll do it the same way, or maybe I won't do that. I mean, that's how you learn. I mean, I think a lot of people think about learning in very academic terms. You know, you listen to a lecturer, they've got PowerPoint slides, you make notes. I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
that kind of learning is really the kind of learning you're talking about. It's a more
No.
that kind of social dimension to learning is actually really important in how people mature and grow and develop. I mean, I think that's what makes running and building a business so interesting because it's about,
Yeah.
there's no textbook for your
Hmm.
business. I mean, there's stuff you can
Yeah.
learn about, but every single business is different, isn't it? So you've got
Hmm.
the job of the CEO is to figure out how to get your thing working with your customers in your market with the resources you've got, etc., which is
Bingo.
what makes it so interesting, I think. And that ability to observe what's happening and to reflect on it and to use that knowledge is one of the things that makes it's so interesting. Just one final question before we
Yeah.
wind up. You've been on a really interesting journey. Has that journey changed you? Would you say you're a more effective CEO now than perhaps, when you started? I mean, in what way has the journey impacted on you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody can answer no to that question, whatever journey you're on. I think so. If we're talking specifically about journey from, founder CEO to now, um, I would say it's probably just more solidified. Um, this idea that a lot of people think they can't do something,
Mm.
because it's right, and everybody and everybody talks about this, like founding is hard. It's this, and I think it's something that for me, it was always like scary, right?
Right.
There's a great quote. I don't remember who said it, right? But they're like, you go into these rooms, I forget if they were talking about politicians in DC or something. And you think that these senators and congressmen are just these, super smart, people, these are the purple, they've got it together. And then you sit down and you talk to them and you realize that they don't know shit,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Right. And the thing that's changed me is I kind of had this imposter syndrome out of the
Right.
gate, which was, I don't know if I can do this. I'm a non-technical founder. I
Yeah.
was getting, basically early on in what Uncover 1.0, multiple respectable VCs in my community were just like, we don't invest in non-technical founders. This isn't going to work. And I'm sitting here with imposter syndrome, like, oh my God, like I screwed up my life. I went into sales. I
Yeah.
learned business. I didn't learn to code. I didn't go to Stanford. Like, well, I'm done. And then you realize that you don't have to. You can learn all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's also changed me is just that AI is the reason I started this business. And it's one of the things that's super helpful is I'm able to use AI in a way that I don't think people had before.
Mm.
But I really wish I'd started 3 or 4 years ago before AI had spiked because I just think that we imposter syndrome is so real until you get into the weeds. And
Mm.
then you realize that you can like do these things and the people doing these things, they're not, a lot of people are very impressive. I'm not trying to negate all the
Mm.
exceptional things people have done, but we all operate under this guise of like, oh, founding is so hard. And it is. But you know what else is hard? You know, being a single mom of 3 kids and
Yeah.
all of these other things in life that people do all the time. But we glorify these founders as if they've like done something like super miraculous. And I would make the argument that once you get to a certain point of the founder journey, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
easy-ish. It's a lot of time consuming and it's stressful, but I know a ton of people who are way more stressed for way better reasons. And that's what's changed me is just this concept of they kind of put founder in this box of this like,
Mm.
you've got to be this special manic, founder mode was one of the most frustrating posts I'd ever seen when Chesky posted about that. And it's just like, you don't have to be the same way to do you don't have to be this one cookie cutter thing to do the thing. Many people have done many things many different ways.
Mm.
And that's how it's changed me. It's like given me this like sense of empowerment of like, this could just go belly up in 2 months and I'll just go do something else, maybe something cooler,
Yeah.
maybe found something else, maybe go work in another company. And I just feel like yeah, it's been empowering. I want to end on a positive note, right?
Yeah.
People
No,
can talk about
it sounds.
my anger and frustration, right? It's empowering. You can do this and the tool that they've given you that's going to replace everybody, this AI tool, is like the golden goose of if you want to do things you don't understand. You don't understand something about how you should structure your database for your customers? Ask ChatGPT, ask Claude, ask Gemini. It'll help you. Um, yeah, sorry, another cat
Yeah,
being
no, I
sick.
mean you're absolutely right. I mean what you're saying is that the process of trying stuff and learning is empowering, and I fundamentally believe that that is the case. It's very empowering, and that's what makes it so interesting. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I like the the Winston Churchill. There's a famous Winston
Oh yeah.
Churchill quote where he says, "Success is going from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm."
Yes.
And I
Yep.
think that one of the things that comes across about you is, when we've spoken in the past, is the enthusiasm you have for what you're doing. And I'm a
Yeah.
great believer that that fun part, the enjoyable, I mean, of course, there are difficult bits about building a business,
Uh-huh.
but the fun part is the bit, and the getting things sorted out and moving things forward and getting those occasional wins. Those are the things that ultimately empower you to keep moving forward and to keep enjoying it. And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes it such an interesting, you know, option really. To building a business is hard, but it's I don't think I could go back to being an employee. I just don't
It's
think I
tough,
could do
right?
it.
When you
I'm
think
too
about
old
it. Yeah.
anyway, but you know.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's the flip side of that coin though. It can be slightly addictive, right? Once you realize that you can just do this, it's very hard, conceptually to go back. But yeah, it's I feel very blessed that I even have
yeah,
the opportunity to do this stuff. So
yeah,
yeah,
likewise.
brilliant.
Steve, thank you for coming along and sharing that story. I mean, it's a great proposition. I really think what you're developing is really cool, and it,
Thank you.
I hope it changes things both for employers and for people hunting for jobs. I mean, I think, because the employers are never happy with the people they recruit, and people looking for jobs are never happy with the process of getting recruited. So if you can make a
Yep.
dent on that, I mean, I think you make a lot of people pretty happy, really. So
Wouldn't that
thanks
be
for
cool?
thanks for coming along and sharing that story, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure just getting to know you over the past couple weeks too. So
Likewise. See you
thanks.
soon. Bye bye.